Happy Monday, diehards, degenerates, gamblers of all ages, over the age of 21 in most places. Welcome to the Die Hard MMA podcast. How is everybody doing this evening? It is time for UFC Saudi Arabia, and we are coming off of a week where we could not be feeling any better. As you may have noticed, the baby blues are back. The Die Hard stimulus check shirt in full effect this week, baby. So if you guys remember, I gave you a little update. It was about a month ago, 3-4 weeks ago, and we were this close. I had a tough start to the year. We were minus 1 unit, and I'm thinking, now it's time to grab 2024 by the haunches and really get after it. Unfortunately, I decided to lose my mind, make a bunch of bad reads, and then all the bad variants in the world hit me at the same time. And we dropped down to about minus 23 units in about 2 weeks' time because I just could not hit water if I fell out of a boat. Well, the last 2 weeks pretty much made up for it. We are back-to-back smashes, and we are coming off a 15-unit positive week between the PFL and the UFC, feeling damn good about ourselves. And for all of you keeping track, the update for 2024, we are now down just shy of 5 units. So 4.84 units for the full year. And we got time. We got plenty of time. We're chilling, but we're feeling good. The reads are there. We're on point. We hit not one, but 2 big prop smashes this week. Liz Carmouche, round 3 at 14-1. And then Brady Heastand, big underdog at 9-1 via submission. So I'm feeling it. I told you guys last week, I think the problem is my father-in-law. I've been hanging out with him for the last couple of weeks, and he tails me. And when the man puts his money on my picks, we're all dead. Forget about it. We're all dead. It was Father's Day this past weekend. We went out to a Diamondbacks game to celebrate with the family, and the man was sitting not 2 feet to my right. And I'm not superstitious, guys, but he is. He was like, Clint, I swear I'm not betting a single thing you put your money on at this UFC fight card, and we smashed. So I think he might be onto something. Maybe it is his fault. We'll blame him. How's everybody doing this evening? We've already got 142 of you in here. What's going on, my guy Dream, Dix Insider, the Grateful Dude, VGO Bufo on the beat. Chef is in the house. We've got Locked A, MMA, Daz Biles, Glenn Bot, all the usuals in here. What's up, everybody? Thank you all so much for being here to talk UFC Saudi Arabia. Tough card this week. And so because we have such a tough card, I had to bring in the big guns. First time on the show, you may know the man from covers.com, a legend in the space, none other than Joe Osborne is going to come on and help us break down this card. Joe, how you doing today, my guy?
I'm good, man. How are you? I'm pumped to dig into this card. I was excited for the original main event, but I think the replacement main event, we have a pretty good betting opportunity, which I know that we'll get into. But yeah, sometimes some of these cards, you look at some of the prelims and you might be like, who in the hell's that guy? Situations like that. But sometimes, like, people complain about these Apex cards and these Fight Night cards, but sometimes there's some spots you can take advantage of. Really, because sometimes odd makers, and that's it can bite you both ways, right? Because sometimes it's a guessing game with these fighters you might not have heard of, and they don't, most of their experience came from another organization. Yep. You don't know what level of competition they were facing. So it can be a guessing game, but sometimes there's some patterns you can pick up on and cash in and make some money if the lines are right.
Absolutely. And it's funny, man, that seems to be me all day. I'm backwards. Like the big pay-per-view cards, I struggle. I have a real tough time for some reason. Like they seem to be chalk heavy, the dogs have a hard time breaking through. And I'm kind of a dog hunter myself. I'm a volume better, so I'm always looking for, near even money or plus money if I can. And it bites me on those big, shiny pay-per-view cards. But these grungy, dumpster fire Apex cards, that seems to be where I shine for some reason. I don't know if it's an edge that I can abuse that nobody else is seeing on a low card where maybe it's mid-level talent. I don't know. I seem to do better on those for some reason.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. It's like the high level, the number of pay-per-view cards. Like, okay, these guys who are very well-known fighters, you know what patterns to look for. Sean Strickland's fighting. Okay, this guy's an absolute decision machine. So maybe we're going to look at some over props or him to win by decision or possibly his opponent to win by decision type of thing. So yeah, I've had some pretty good success on the pay-per-view cards this year. But it can be a bit of a mixed bag with some of these fight night cards.
Absolutely. And this one, man, lands somewhere in the middle, right? Like we're flying halfway across the world. So these guys who, buddy up with Chechnyan warlords so they can get into the UFC and get some fights done. That's the kind of card we're dealing with. So it was like not quite a pay-per-view, but it's not quite a fight night. It's an interesting card this week, man. First and foremost, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you being here. But hey, we already kind of teed it up. We might as well just get straight on into it because there's a lot of action to talk about here on this card. We got a lot of work to do. First fight of the night, we've got Long Xiao taking on Chang Ho Lee in this spot. And it's a couple of guys that I have no idea what I'm doing here on this one, man. I'll be honest with you. Neither of these guys' names rang a bell for me. And it turns out this is actually the finale for the road to UFC Singapore. And that's why. Because I'm sorry. Of all of the feeder leagues for the UFC, I think the road to the UFC is the worst. I think it's the lowest level. The bar is set low. The UFC is really trying to break into these Asian countries, and the level of talent just, for the most part, isn't quite there yet. This is how you build it, but not all these guys are ready. So I was unfamiliar, man. You've got Long Xiao, who is 26-8. He actually fought on Dana White's Contender Series, and he lost to Christian Quinones before then going over onto the road to UFC. And I'll be honest with you, that loss aged pretty poorly, man. Quinones is 1-2 in the UFC. His only win was an extremely early stoppage over Khalid Taha, one that I remember extremely clearly because I had money on Khalid that night. And I was real upset that the ref stepped in because he was one of the most durable guys you'll ever see. He got rocked, and the ref waved it off like immediately, didn't give him a chance to fight his way back in. At any rate, he's been cut from the UFC, and that's that guy's only win. And this guy lost to him. So if we're doing MMA math, it's not great. But he really struggled with like the length of Quinones, the speed, the range, the distance. He couldn't find him in their fight. Now, Xiao will have a 1-inch reach advantage here in this spot over Chang Ho Lee, who is 9-1. His last two wins are coming by KO TKO. So this guy does seem to be a bit more of the finisher of the two, constantly coming forward, wants to stand right in front of you, tries to cut the cage off, long straight punches. Looks like he's got decent power. But man, he was in just a grinding, brutal fight a couple fights ago where it was like 15 minutes of nonstop cage control. He showed off a good chin. I don't know. It's a pick 'em, I think, here for a reason, man. This is one I don't have a whole lot of expertise on, and I really don't want my money on. I'll pick Chang Ho Lee just for the sake of having a pick. Do you have anything to add on this one or any thoughts on either of these guys?
Well, no, it's the mystery I talked about, right? Like the level of competition doesn't seem very strong for either of these dudes, right? And sometimes in a situation like this where it's like, okay, it's a coin flip fight, then you'd be like, okay, let's look at the odds and be like, maybe sometimes the odds would be lopsided and one guy's plus 180. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Maybe we should just throw a sprinkle on that guy. But yeah, I'm not betting on this. If I needed to, though, I would go with Chang Ho Lee. I mean, he's on a pretty good run here with 3 finished victories in a row. His opponent, man, this is an incredible volume of fights this guy has for only being 26 years old. He's fought 33 times. And he is on, we talked about that loss he had on the Dana White Contender Series, but previous to that, his most recent loss was way back in 2017. But the mystery is the level of competition. We have no idea. So yeah,
Yep.
you're flipping coins here. So yeah, I'd stay away, but I would go with Holy. He seems to be the a little bit of a hotter fighter with the 3 finished victories in a row there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. I have no problem flipping coins if I'm getting plus 160. You know, if there's a coin flip fight and I'm getting a nice juicy plus money number, no issue. But if they lined it appropriately, it's minus 110s on both sides. Nothing for me here.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
All right, man. Let's move along then. Next up, we have Magomed Gadzi. Okay, I can do this. Gadzhiyasulov. And he's taking on Brendson Ribeiro. This is a more fun fight. This one's more my speed, man.
Yeah.
This is Dana White's Contender Series 2.0 here in this spot. You've got Brendson Ribeiro 15-6, who's 0-1 off the Contender Series. And I'll tell you, Joe, I love fading Contender Series guys. That's like my newest, hottest thing, that they come into the UFC with so much hype, especially the guys that get the flying knee KO. But it's like 1 out of 10 of them that are actually any good. So they get to the UFC and they just can't recreate that type of, big performance, and they end up dropping 2 or 3 fights before they finally get on the horse. I think I faded Ribeiro, if memory serves correctly, in his UFC debut. But big, wide stance, wild punches. Dude is crazy explosive, but he plays with his hands down. Essentially, every single one of his fights is like life and death. He's either going to knock you out or he's going to get knocked out himself, and he's okay with playing that game. He's been knocked out 3 times. He's been submitted twice. He's your classic Dana White's Contender Series action fighter. He will have a 6-inch reach advantage over Magomed, though, in this spot. 8-0, undefeated. Magomed is coming off of Dana White's Contender Series. This is his debut in the organization. Man, this guy's a good kicker. Big kicks, chopping calf kicks, likes to attack the body. He's got real quick counters. I noticed some nice little check hooks that he throws in there. And he can wrestle. He's one of these guys that shifts from striking to grappling pretty easily and rides the body lock when he needs to buy some time. He can kind of bully some people around, but I'm a little nervous, man, because his Dana White's Contender Series fight, he was fighting a dude that looked like he was in the wrong weight class. He looked like a bag of milk, and this guy could not get him out of there. I don't know if it's toughness props to his opponent or if we should worry about the power for Magomed, because he should have finished that dude. I really think this is going to be a 1-round fight, man. The odds aren't pretty. It doesn't look like it's a really great spot for betting. Minus 340 on Magomed. But I do think this is a spot where the UFC is trying to showcase him a little bit and give him a spot where he can really kind of stand out. I think Magomed gets this, but minus 340.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. There's not a whole lot of betting value here. Magomed being undefeated in his career, he's minus 340, like you said. He's likely to get the finish here. However, the over-under rounds is sitting there at 1.5 with the under at minus 260. I'm seeing right now. So not a whole lot I like there. But Ribeiro, he's typically one of my favorite type of fighters to bet on. All gas, no brakes, right?
Yep.
21 career fights. He's only been to the scorecards once. He's got a handful of KOs, a handful of submissions. He's been knocked out. He has been submitted. But, it takes 2 to tango on these type of bets. And sometimes this is where I talk about, sometimes you can find the holes with the odds that are being made for these fights. There's no holes being made here. 1.5 at minus 260 on the under. So, yeah, no thanks on that. Magomed by some type of finish, most likely, if you really want to get something down on that fight. But that would be a stay away for me. I will watch it though, and hopefully watch someone get finished in the first round.
Absolutely, man. These ones should be entertaining. I'm looking forward to watching them. But yeah, definitely. So far, you and me on the same page. Couple of passes to go ahead and get the night started. Nothing wrong with that. Next fight up, we have got Muin Gafurov, and he's taking on Kyung-Ho Kang. And this is where it starts to get a little interesting here for me, Joe. So Muin Gafurov is a guy that, I'll be honest with you, I'm still not sure if he's fully UFC level or not based on his performances so far. 18-6. He's 2-2 since his showing on Dana White's Contender Series, but he's 0-2 in the UFC. The 2 wins that he had came in the LFA. He just got choked out by Said Nurmagomedov in like 1 minute. Now, that was, you can kind of forgive that one. Said is an absolute neck merchant. He knows what he's doing. That front choke is his favorite move in the entire world. So no issues there. I won't knock him too hard. Just, minus 1,000 IQ to punch yourself right into a guillotine choke against that guy to start the fight. But he got dropped by Chad and Hellinger on his Dana White's Contender Series fight and then lost that fight via split. So again, just real tough to feel like this guy's got much at this level. He throws big looping hooks, big clubbing overhand. He spins so freaking much, always spinning back fist, spinning heel kicks. He's got power, but he really is just going to go in there and try and club his way to a victory every single time. Kyung-Ho Kang is basically the opposite. 19-10. He is a durable tactician. This guy likes to play the outside. He will jab you to death. If he can out wrestle you, he'll take you down. Like, he's kind of got a long point fighting style and does whatever it takes to get the win, but that usually means that he's fighting extremely close. Joe, I have to switch hats here for a minute. The chat is asking for it, but it's time we busted out the tinfoil cap for this one,
right,
because
I
am pretty sure the UFC set this fight up just to get Gafurov a win, because they know overseas Kyung-Ho Kang is going to fight close. The bigger shots are going to come from Muin Gafurov, and I'll bet you by the end of this fight, I score at 29-28 for Kyung-Ho Kang, but the scorecards are going to read 29-28 from Muin Gafurov. I think Gafurov is going to get the win here in his own backyard, and I think it's set up that way almost purposefully. The way we've seen shenanigans with the judges these days, I'm smelling something here, Joe. So what do you make of this fight, man? I'm going to pick Muin Gafurov. I don't want to lay minus 155 on him. I think it's going to be a close fight. But when DraftKings drops that split decision prop, that's where I'll be looking.
Yeah, I bet a lot of totals. I bet a lot of fight to go the distance, not to go the distance. I think this one's going the distance. I'm seeing it at minus 155 right now. You look at Ho Kang's been a bit of a decision machine here lately. He's gone to decision in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his last 6 fights. And then you dig into the stats for the guy. Some people don't look at. I like looking at the stats for the UFC fights. I know it's smaller sample sizes, but I do handicap it in a similar manner to Major League Baseball and NFL, which I'm also heavily involved in.
I love your NFL work. Let me just, shout that out. That's how I found you in the first place.
Yeah, I had a good season last year, so hopefully I'll be able to do that again this upcoming season. Am I allowed to swear here?
Absolutely.
I'm fucking pumped up for NFL season here, 2000. I don't want to wish the summer away, but I can't wait for my red zone here in September.
I'm with you.
But yeah, I mean, neither guy is a very high volume striker. They both their striking defense isn't that good either. I mean, they don't get hit a lot, but they're both close to a negative striking differential, each of them. They each like to mix in the takedown attempts. So I could see a lot of time being chewed up with failed takedown attempts, pressing up each other up against the cage. So yeah, I think this one's going to be a longer one, and I like it to go to decision at minus 155.
I like that. I don't mind that one bit. I think you're on the right track there on that one. I think I'd be looking for props here. Gafurov, like I said, by decision. Gafurov by split. I think Kyung-Ho Kang is tough enough to hang in there and eat those big power shots. And then when it goes to the cards, I think it'll be close.
Yes, sir.
All right. Glad we're kind of reading that one the same way here on this one.
I'll say you're one of the dudes out there. There's a couple guys out there. There's a bunch of us in this space, and there's a lot of guys who are just specific to MMA, UFC. I always like to look at your card to see if we line up. And when we don't, it's like, oh, shit. But then it's like, okay, we're on the same side here. So I like that. So you're one of those guys for me. So hopefully we'll line up here.
Hell yeah. I love to hear that. I love to hear that. No, it's crazy though, man. I swing from the rafters. So, 2 weeks ago I was dropping 14 units on the same card, and then Saturday I'm winning 12. So I'm a mixed bag sometimes. You never know.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. So let's get going. We've got 466 live viewers. Thank you all so much for being with us. If you're here on YouTube, please hit the like button for me. Share the show. Leave a comment after we're done. If you're watching us on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, make sure you check out Joe. If you don't know Joe, what are you doing? You must be living under a rock. But share the show out there. Let's get, what? We are this close to getting up over 1,000 live viewers on a show. Let's do it today. Why not today? Why not us? All right. Next up, Rinat Fakhretdinov takes on public enemy number one, Nicolas Dalby. Joe, I can't tell you how many times Nicolas Dalby has snatched the money right out of my hands. This guy,
Oh man.
I cannot seem to get him right. He's always disrespected by the betting market. He's consistently disrespected by me. And every time I think I've got an angle to try to bet against this guy, he just manages to get the win. And then the one time I decided to actually go with him, I think I bet on him when he fought Tim Means, and that was the fight that he lost. So like, I just can't get him right whatsoever.
That's Piotr Jan for
There
me.
you go.
I can't tell you how many times, and a lot of people have this story if you've been betting on the sport for a couple of years now. Of course, we know what happened in the Aljamain Sterling, the first fight. I went on every radio station, every podcast, and I think he was being offered at a pretty good line. I think he might have been being undervalued in that fight. And as we all recall, the illegal knee, which was stupid on his part, but he should have cruised to victory. Then the second fight that they had was pretty close. Then he got absolutely robbed versus Sean O'Malley. So yeah, I lost quite a bit of money on Piotr Jan over the year, but I was in Miami to watch him fight live there at UFC 299. So I was cheering for him. I was pretty fired up for that.
That is awesome. No, man, it's funny because especially in fights, we've all got that guy that we can't lose on, and then we've all got that guy we just can't get by. And Dalby is one of those for me. Rinat Fakhretdinov, 22-2-1, just relentless grappling this guy. Nasty ground and pound. He kind of got exposed a little bit against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos in his last fight. Tough to say exposed because Elizeu is one of those guys that's hung around the top end of the division for just years and years. But he got held to 1 of 9 on takedowns, and he gassed himself out trying to get an early finish on a very durable veteran fighter who just wasn't going anywhere, had nothing left to offer, and nearly got his ass pounded in round 3, got finished almost, ended up with a draw. So here they are. They're kind of running it back, and it's a very similar setup, except I don't think Dalby has the same power that Dos Santos has. It's almost the same situation. Dalby has a little bit worse takedown defense, not quite as much power. He's got great cardio. He's got that gritty, never quit type of attitude, and you've got to really give it to him for that. He's on a 4-fight win streak. He just derailed a Bonfim brother. But man, again, I feel like this fight is set up with a very particular set of intentions. I think the betting odds are going to attract a lot of people to Nicolas Dalby because he just cashed in this kind of a spot against a prospect-style opponent. And it's literally the same setup. And Fakhretdinov just looked like he gassed out in his last fight. I actually think Fakhretdinov's going to smash him. I think Dalby's going to end up on his back early, and he's not going to be able to get up and push the pace the way that Elizeu Zaleski did. And then even if he does, and we get to round 3 and it starts to get a little hairy, I just don't think Dalby has the finishing power to take this guy out. I kind of think Fakhretdinov might even finish him.
Yeah, I'm going to take him to win by decision. Actually, okay. So you look into these guys, they have over 50 combined fights. Neither has ever been finished in their career. So each of these guys is very durable. You can take fight to go the distance at -175, but I'm going to take him to win by decision -120. This is a dude who hasn't lost since 2013. That was just his second career pro fight. You dig into his statistics in the UFC, he's got a striking differential of around +2 per minute. That's pretty damn good. What's Dalby at? Dalby's at about +0.5 per minute. But the big edge, I think, is going to come with the takedowns. He lands 4.25 takedowns per 15 minutes in the UFC. So I think he's going to be able to get him on his back. I think that's going to be able to chew up a lot of clock here. And I think it's going to go to the scorecard. So -120 on a guy that hasn't lost since 2013 against an opponent who's never been finished. I think the stars are aligning on that one.
All right. I like it. Now, real quick, though, before we move on to the next fight, Joe, we've already predicted, or at least you've already predicted, a couple of fights to go the distance.
Mm-hmm.
We've been seeing a lot of decisions lately in the UFC. What do you make of the whole gloves thing? Do you think they really are affecting the knockout rates that we've been looking at?
I don't know. I think the sample size is still too small.
Yeah.
And you would really have to dig into it. But yeah, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not. I saw people pointing that out on Sunday morning, and we'll see what happens on this card, because I had 2 fights going under 2.5 rounds on Saturday night. The main event, which ended up hitting, and another fight. But yeah, it's still too early to tell. I wouldn't be basing bets based on that kind of UFC wide trend right now. Now, if this card, there's a shitload of decisions, okay. The sample size is growing. But yeah, it is something to have on your radar, absolutely, but not something I'd be basing bets off of.
Okay. Well, because from what I understand, since we've had the glove changes, I think there have been a total of 5 knockouts technically.
Yeah.
And I think one of those was the Bruno spinning elbow. So, like, he didn't even hit him with his hands to get the knockout. There's been one actual punch knockout since the glove change, because like Tyra was a blown knee TKO. You know what I mean? It's things like that. So they aren't truly even knockouts. It's a little weird. It'll be interesting over the next couple of weeks and months. I don't think I've ever seen Dana White backtrack on anything in his entire life. I'll be curious if they switch back to the old gloves, if this is actually a thing and continues a trend.
Well, yeah, if it takes away from the excitement of the sport, I could see them, admitting like, okay, we tested them out over several cards, and it turns out the older ones are better. So we'll go back to those ones and revisit new gloves. Why aren't they doing the ones that will avoid the eye pokes?
These are supposed to. That's what's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They're literally designed to help not have eye pokes, and it was the first fight of the night when they introduced the gloves. They got an eye poke the very first fight. I don't think the gloves are doing what they're supposed to. And my theory on it, and then we can move on. My theory on it is the fact that it's got a little less padding is, I think the fighters might almost be less incentivized to throw hard. You know what I mean? Because like if they're worried about like their hands breaking, or if they hurt their hand in the first round, you can't chuck it with the same force that you could with the old gloves, where it was like an extra ounce of padding right on top of your knuckles. I think that might have something to do with it, because some of these guys are just maybe wearing their bodies down, or their hands are hurting, stuff like that. And so they end up not throwing quite as hard, which leads to less knockout.
Yeah, and maybe there's an adjustment period too. Like I remember in the NBA a couple of years ago, they switched the ball out to a different brand. They went from like Spalding to Wilson, or Wilson.
The one with the magnets, right? They added the balls with the magnets.
Yeah, and the players didn't like scoring was down briefly. Like, you see stuff like baseball, those sneaky bastards, they'll sneak in new balls every once in a while and stuff like that when offense is down. So yeah, maybe
I'm all for the juiced MLB balls, man. Give me all the home run dingers. That's the only way I bet MLB is. I'm looking for plus 800 home run props.
Yes, sir. Yeah. With you
there. All right. We'll move on. Next fight up, Nasrat Haqparast, and he takes on Jared Flash Gordon. And this is my only bet on the entire card, Joe. Unfortunately, this is my only bet on the entire card. Real quick, I forgot to mention at the top of the show, guys, the Cedric Dumas fight is off the card. Cedric was filling in on short notice and was going to be facing Dennis Tululian. Apparently, due to travel concerns with the short notice replacement, he's not able to make it out there, which really sucks, because he opened up at minus 250, Joe, and I pounced at about minus 148. He shot straight back up to minus 250 again. So I had a nice bet at the buy low number, and I thought it was crazy for being down that low in the first place. So I'm already feeling like I'm missing out on money because that fight got canceled. So I'm a little upset. But anyway, c'est la vie, is what it is. This fight, though, I've got a max bet here on Nasrat Haqparast in this spot, Joe. I am not a Jared Gordon. I don't want to say fan. I actually like the guy. I love his story. I love his attitude. Yeah. He's a great dude. But as far as the fighting goes, I do my best to try to end up on the other side of him when I can justify it. He's 35 years old. He's a bit long in the tooth. And he's had kind of a career-long durability issue. Now, I've backed off on that a little bit the last couple fights, because he's looked kind of career best his last few fights going out there. But when you look back at what he's done, it's not as impressive as, you would kind of recall it to be. I know he's physically strong. I know he's a good grappler. I know he's got great cardio. But, man, he's only beaten 2 guys that have actual winning UFC records that are on the roster right now. He's got a win over Leo Santos, who's 44 years old, by the way, at the time that they fought. I think there's a big asterisk on that one. Leo Santos was a monster, But when you're catching him at 44, that doesn't mean quite the same thing to me, especially when he's running out of cardio. He's got a split decision win over Joe Solecki. I don't think Joe Solecki's very good, man. And getting a split decision win over him doesn't say a whole lot here for me. Now, I know he's coming off the KO loss over Marco Madsen, and Mark does have a winning UFC record, but he just retired. He's no longer with the organization. So you're scraping the bottom of the barrel to go back and see where this guy won and what he was good at. His losses, granted, they're to guys like Charles Oliveira. It's big steps up in competition where he has lost. But I think it's pretty clear at this point that he's kind of a mid-level grinder gatekeeper type, and he's taken on Nasrat Haqparast, who's in his prime. He's 16-5, 28 years old, looked career best in his last fight. Absolutely smoked Jamie Mullarkey in round 1. Now, I know Jamie Mullarkey's chin is a bit of a concern these days. He's not trending the right direction, but it still was an impressive performance from a guy that's usually a decision machine. Really nice boxing, fast, accurate hands, crazy volume, incredible speed. And man, when he had Mullarkey hurt, it was the follow-up shots that did it. He landed a flurry of like 40 shots in the space of like 3 seconds while he was trying to get up and reestablish his equilibrium in that spot. I really feel like Nasrat is coming into his own. You know, at 28 years old, that's when he's really starting to get into his physical prime. He's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage, and he's got a 78% takedown defense rating. Now, I know the takedowns are going to be the argument here in this spot, but they're flying Jared Gordon halfway around the world to face a guy who's got heritage that's a little bit more the local flavor. Again, I feel like Nasrat's going to have hometown advantage here in this kind of a spot, and they just are not favoring blanket control the way that they used to. I think Nasrat's going to have a massive striking advantage. It might go the full 15, but I would not be shocked if Nasrat TKOs Jared after just kind of voluming him up and hurting him on the feet a couple different times. A late finish wouldn't shock me here. But I ponied up, man. The most I'll ever risk on one spot is my 7 unit max bet. That's what I call it. This is number 11. I've only made 10, 7-3 overall total. I actually have one in the chamber. That's a parlay. You guys can't get it anymore. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago. Peyton Talbot with Umar Nurmagomedov. That line is blown way out. So you can't, make the same parlay. But I locked that one in first. This one is going to cash first. So we'll call this one number 11. It's Nasrat Haqparast for me, man. What about you?
I don't know, man. I think we're in a bit of disagreement here. I think Gordon can give him a fight. So it's funny how things work for Gordon, right? Like his fandom really start to take off when he got screwed over versus Paddy Pimblett, right? Then he's kind of had 2 unusual fights since the no contest with Bobby Green. And then
he got KO'd stiff.
Yeah, and then he ended up knocking out Mark Madsen. Madsen was probably winning up until that exchange that ended the fight, actually. I would argue. I believe that was at Madison Square Garden in the fall when those guys last fought. But the style of matchup. So we have 2 very high volume strikers here, but the big difference is Gordon lands at a much higher accuracy. So 57% versus 44%. And the thing, he gets hit a lot less too, almost 2 fewer significant strikes per minute. So Nasrat is a guy that does get hit a lot, but what it comes down to, and you pointed out, you always got to look at the level of competition, right? Mm-hmm. So that said, though, when you factor in the odds, though, Jared Gordon, I think that's a decent underdog bet at plus 210. Now I'm rooting for you because you're putting 7 units on the dude here, but I got to be honest with the notes that I took here beforehand. So yeah, I haven't decided if I'm going to pull the trigger on Gordon there at plus 210. I might lay off after hearing your breakdown, but I think he's going to be competitive. So we'll see. But I'll be rooting for you because you're going all out on that one.
I appreciate it. Now, there's nothing wrong with a little head-to-head. Don't hold back just because I got a big bet on it. Got to shout out my guy John Stargarian from the Club and Sub podcast. He's a regular Jared better here, and he's already told me how wrong I am and bet the other side. So it happens, man. But I hear you. I do hear you. The thing for me though is it comes down, like you said, to the level of competition. The guys he's putting those numbers up against just are not good. You know what I mean? The guys that he's losing to that are good are smoking him. He's getting knocked out in round 1 by all the guys that are better than him. And so we're not really getting a sample size against good competition for those numbers. Whereas Nasrat, he's doing that to everybody. John Makdessi, who even though he's a little older, he's a consistent staple. He lost by decision to Bobby Green, whereas Jared, I know it was a bit of a fluky situation, but let's be honest, Bobby Green doesn't knock out many people. Bobby Green put Jared out cold. And a lot of people are pointing back to like the Dan Hooker fight where he got taken down and, worried about his grappling defense. Joe, I never in a million years thought that Dan Hooker was going to be shooting for takedowns on Nasrat Haqparast that night. First off, it was 3 years ago. So I'm pretty sure the kid has updated his takedown defense and scrambling ability since then. But I doubt he and his team were prepared for a Dan Hooker wrestling offense that night. I think that was playing chess when your opponent was playing checkers and he caught the guy off guard. I think Nasrat coming in knowing Jared Gordon, the way he fights, what he does, they will be appropriately prepared for this one. And he probably will have more success defending the takedown, keeping the range. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's almost like a stick and move type of game plan where you just never let him get settled in, never let him get to your hips and win a 15-minute decision where the guy doesn't have his bets path to victory as something he can get to easily.
Yeah, you might be talking me out of wasting money on Jared. It's all like you talk about where they're at in their careers too. Like it's always important to take a look at the ages of the fighters, how much damage they've taken and things like that. So yeah. He has rat snipe, but I don't know, plus 210. I got to spend a little bit more time thinking about that one.
You'll have to let me know. Hit me up if you decide to pull the trigger on it.
I will for sure.
All right, man. Next up, we've got the Shara Bullet Magomedov, the man who's captured the imaginations of the MMA community. And he's taking on short notice replacement Joilton, I think is how you say that. Joilton Lutterbach. Yeah. This guy actually has a decent bit of experience. Joilton Lutterbach is a man who I kind of recognized and was like, why do I know that name? He actually fought back in the PFL. He's 38-10. He's a judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. This guy actually has a decent set of skills. He's filling in here on short notice for Ihor Pateria, lamb to the slaughter. They were trying to set Shara up with a nice big win there. Joilton is 31 years old, and he's got a lot of Muay Thai and kickboxing experience as well. I was watching his fights, and he's got some nasty clinch attacks, man. Big power on the feet. He's got lots of trips and dumps. His wrestling really just isn't there, but that judo is. And he's always bugging people that he's fighting because if you get off balance just a little bit, he'll dump you and put you on the ground. The only problem for me is that he can't really keep people there. Every single fight of his that I went back and watched, he would dump them. And as soon as they got to like a hip or a knee or so, he just could not establish top control on them. So they kind of worked their way back up and then you're back to striking. And I think that kind of causes a problem for him here because Shara against Bruno Silva looked like he had no idea what he was doing off of his back. He did go ahead and get the win, 1-0 in his UFC debut, 12-0 undefeated at this point.
Yeah.
But he looked bad in that fight. 57% takedown defense, small sample size, just the one fight, obviously. But he let chunks of that fight go where he just could not get off of his back. So could Lutterbach theoretically get on top of this guy and keep him down? Maybe so. And frankly, if Shara is just learning how to stand up under guys because he's not used to wrestling, the big key for me here, Joe, is you make mistakes in that transition. When you've got a guy like Lutterbach that's got the subs that he does on his record, I think we might have a live dog here. This guy's got those long, lanky arms, anacondas, darces. He takes the back quick. Like, this is the type of guy that really could cause you problems in that stand-up transition. If they never hit the ground, I think this is Shara probably running away with it. But because of the grappling aspect of this fight, it's a whole heck of a lot closer than I think most people are going to realize until that cage door closes. You've got Shara Magomedov as a minus 245 favorite. And against a guy like Ihor, I'm laying it. But Joilton's got me kind of second guessing this a little bit and thinking about maybe a little bit of a live dog shot, man. What do you think of this fight?
Yeah, I'm happy you pointed that out about Lutterbach and the potential of submission here because I think this one is getting finished inside the distance, minus 105. Someone's getting knocked out or somebody is getting submitted because we have two very aggressive fighters. Each of these guys is in there looking for the finish. You pointed it out for Magomedov. So 10 knockouts in 12 fights. And a lot of those have been very fast knockouts. 7 of those 10 came in the first round. Then you take a look at this pattern for Lutterbach. 8 of his last 11 fights have been finished inside the distance. He got knocked out by Dricus Duplessis back in 2019.
Yes, he did.
A little trivia for you guys.
No shame.
There. But
no shame in getting knocked out by the future champ.
Yeah, you can't really knock him for that, right? But
That's
yeah, he has been knocked out before, right? So yeah, I think minus 105 not to go the distance. I think that's a solid bet when you have two ultra aggressive guys in here, and I think it's pretty good matchmaking for a short notice fight too, because sometimes they just throw whoever in the hell they can get the hop in there, and but yeah, it seems like they're still being pretty strategic with it. I think that's going to be an entertaining fight for sure.
I like it. I like the violence look for sure. We'll really put those new gloves to the test here on this one, but there's plenty of knees and elbows. We can avoid the gloves on this one and still get a finish. Looking at Bet Online, Lutterbach by sub is like plus 600. Usually, DraftKings and FanDuel are just a little bit more generous to us. So I'm going to sit tight and see if maybe we get a slightly better number when it opens up stateside. But a submission prop, don't be shocked, guys, if I end up taking a dog shot with a little sub prop here on this one, because I think that's very, very live considering what we've seen from Shara recently. All right. Real quick, man, I got to shout out the sponsors and then we can get back to it. First and foremost, guys, this is Home of Fight. You know where it's at. This is the best place to be for MMA. And if you haven't joined our Telegram group, make sure you do. The link is in the description below. You're going to get banger news every time anything happens in the world of MMA. It's right here in this Telegram group. So go ahead, jump in here, get with us. If you guys are betting on MMA or you're trying to research for anything coming up like Dana White's Contender Series, Spectation Sports is where you want to be. We've got some awesome shows coming up. Mecca, Aries FC is right around the corner again, or Aries Fighting Series. There's two different Aries, by the way. Aries Fighting Series, and they're both here on Spectation Sports. So if you want to subscribe to Spectation, watch some more MMA action, promo code DIEHARD will get you 20% off that subscription. Next up, you guys know I've been shouting them out for a couple weeks now. Our guy John Kelly, who's a friend of the show, regular guest of the show, they started Fight Numbers, and this place is awesome. The tools are great. It's mostly for DFS. They also have this odds tracker, so you can find the best odds currently on the market today. It's one of my favorite tools on here. Ever since I started using their tools, Joe, I've actually been able to be profitable in MMA DK because I've told the people on the show, fish in a barrel. I can't do DK to save my soul. These guys have really helped me out and pointed me in the right direction. I'm at least breaking even. And sometimes I even win a little bit. So maybe I'll take a big one down one of these days. Last but certainly not least, Bet Openly. You guys know they're the main sponsor here for the show. Peer-to-peer betting, 1% juice. They have reached the $7 million saved mark, folks. They are saving gamblers like us money on a daily basis by charging just 1% juice to go ahead and get your action in here. And we're doing giveaways. Last week at UFC Vegas 93, we did a $200 giveaway contest for free. You guys just sign up. We're giving out free shit constantly all the time on Bet Openly. Link in the description below. And we're starting our next bankroll challenge at UFC 303, guys. We're going to give away $600 in cash prizes on Bet Openly. It's a $50 bankroll challenge, so that's all you got to do. If you've already got $50 or if you want to deposit $50, come participate in the 6-week MMA challenge, and winners get $300 for first, $200 for second, $300 for third place, and it's a real fun contest. This will be the third time we've done it. It's been a blast. We've got a couple winners here in the chat already for this one, so come hang out, get some free money, and we're going to have a damn good time with it. Starts at UFC 303, so be ready. We got a couple weeks.
Can I shout something out as well?
Absolutely.
So I'm doing something very cool tomorrow morning. I'm interviewing George St. Pierre. So it's part of my gig here at Covers. This will be the 4th time that I'm interviewing him. And basically, we kind of go, he breaks down his picks for the main card, essentially. But I get to ask him basically anything I want. So I want to open this up to your live viewers right now. I put a tweet at the top of my Twitter or X account at JTFOZ. If you have any questions for George St. Pierre, drop them there. I'm going to pick a few, and I'm going to interview him tomorrow, and I'll ask him some fan questions, I guess we'll call them. Now, I've already been through all the what happened with the Anderson Silva. Yeah, right down there, the second one down there. I'll be interviewing. If you scroll down a little bit there, yeah, drop any questions you have for him below, and I will pick a few to ask him. Now, I got to interview him in person back in, I think he was in March, which was awesome. Nicest guy you would ever meet. He's as genuine as you'd think he would be. Very, very nice guy. And we got to talk about why the fights with Anderson Silva and Khabib never came to happen. They were both pretty close, by the way. I have that interview pinned at the top of my Twitter account. But if you have any questions for GSP, something interesting, drop them there and I'll pick a few to ask him.
Very cool. That is awesome. Make sure you guys get over there and give the man a follow. Hop in if you've got some questions for GSP.
The GOAT. Man, my GOAT.
That's mine too, actually. Mine too. It's funny. Joe, when my wife and I were dating, her absolute favorite MMA fighter was GSP. Okay. And for one of her birthdays, I bought her a GSP calendar for the year so that she could have GSP in her room. I'm that kind of a guy. So just nice, helping the lady out. I think it kept her around a little bit.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we watch. You're probably like this too. There's certain fighters you get nervous when you watch them fight, and GSP would be at the top of the list. Where I've gotten to the point where for a lot of these UFCs, I just watch them alone by myself because we used to get together with a bunch of guys and you're all drinking beer and eating food and people yelling and stuff like that. And I'd be the guy saying, guys, would you shut the fuck up? I want to hear the post-fight interview here. And they're like, what are you post-fight interview? What are you talking about? So yeah, and so like in a situation when he was fighting, I would just like to watch him by myself and just be nervous and watch him pick up the W. So yeah, I'm pumped to interview him tomorrow. Should be fun.
That's super cool, man. No, I'm right there with you. Absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started the podcast in the first place, because the family was sick of hearing me talk about fighting. So I had to get an outlet. So I'm right there with you. You got to hang out with fellow degenerates. Otherwise you end up spoiling the party.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys, here we go. Got a couple fights left to talk about. Next up, Johnny Walker takes on Volkan Oezdemir, no time himself, still the just nut low worst MMA nickname of all time. The guy gets 2 KOs over the chinniest fighters in the division and calls himself no time. Come on, Volkan. He hasn't knocked out anybody since 2019. I don't want to hear about it. Man, this they get me every time, man. I'm a huge fan of Johnny Walker. I love this guy. I want to see him do well. And I've made the mistake of betting on him a couple of times when it was more of a heart bet than a head bet. I've gotten a little bit better about it. We ended up hitting the crazy submission prop when he choked out Ion Kutalava, called that one, got paid on that one that week. So we've had some success, but this is where the rubber meets the road a little bit. I kind of feel like we've found the ceiling for Johnny Walker, right? He's a freak athlete. He is massive for the weight class. But he's really toned down what made him exciting in the first place because he's got to protect that chin. He's got this weird thing. I've never seen it before. When he gets hurt, it's like his body flips a switch and he just loses control of everything. The spaz outs that he has when he flails, when he's hurt, it's so weird to look at. But he knows he's got to protect that jaw. And anybody who's actually in like the legitimate top 5 of the division, they're eventually going to make contact. Magomed and Ankalaev proved that in his last fight. There's only so much you can do to stop them. They'll get in there, they'll land one, and then a guy like poor Johnny's just done because he can't take it. But because of that, he's changed his style. He's fighting longer. He's using a lot more kicks. He's a lot more low volume. He's not as exciting as a finisher anymore, but he also showed off that the guy can grapple, and he's just freaking huge. So I still think there's some upside to Johnny Walker these days, given the right opponent. Volkan Oezdemir, man, Joe in his last fight against Bogdan Guskov, I was one fight early to the dance with my guy Bogdan Guskov. I went to war with Bogdan, and it looked for a second there, for a real hot second, he was going to finish Volkan early, and then the tables turned real quick. Thankfully, Bogdan got on track, and now everybody knows he's fun, he's exciting, but that was a tough debut for him that night. Volkan Oezdemir, when I did that breakdown, I said I think he's shot, man. I really just feel like Volkan is like headed the wrong direction at this point in his career. He's 34 years old. He's alternating wins and losses. He got beat up by Nikita Krylov, looked bad in that fight. Poor gas tank. Nikita, a guy that I'm personally not very high on. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that one, but I felt like that was a big red flag. The fact that he couldn't take a guy like Nikita. And then even though he beat Paul Craig, it was like the most boring fight in 205 history. It was 1,000 IQ. He never let the guy have any type of opportunity to get the win, which you got to give him credit for. But at the same time, it's like, you really should be knocking out Paul Craig. Anybody who's anybody right now is knocking out Paul Craig. So the fact that Volkan couldn't do that, very sus. Man, I think I got to go with Johnny Walker here. I like Johnny from a fan perspective, but I just think Volkan's going to have a hard time closing the distance. And when he struggles at that range, he's going to get kicked. It's going to be low volume. Johnny can avoid the offense. I think Johnny's got the better gas tank. And then, frankly, I think Johnny's the better offensive grappler at this point. I think he can take Volkan Oezdemir down. Don't be shocked if Johnny Walker ends up on top of Volkan in this fight. And when they get tired, Johnny's able to just kind of lean on him or drag him to the floor. It could look like the Thiago Santos fight, too, where they're just kind of staring at each other and he's kicking the leg and just barely scores a little bit ahead of his opponent. I don't think Volkan's going to find the chin this time, man. If he couldn't do it on Paul Craig, I don't think he's doing it on Johnny. I'll pick Walker here.
Yeah, I would lean Walker as well. These guys, they've had pretty similar careers in terms of, okay, they have some marquee wins on their resume, but once they fight those upper tier opponents, guys who are, around the top 5, they're usually going to lose, and sometimes in devastating fashion for these guys. So Walker is a guy, it looked like he was starting to put the pieces back together before he ran into Ankalaev, and he fought him twice, of course. We know what happened there. But previous to that, he was on a 3-fight win streak, 2 finishes. Still a guy that I do think has potential. He's going to beat what I call the entry-level light heavyweights, guys who are, bordering on being ranked. But lose to the true title contenders. Oezdemir, you can make an argument that maybe he's being overlooked a little bit here. It's funny that he fought Daniel Cormier all those years ago, right? Like, when you think of Daniel Cormier, you don't say, oh, yeah, I remember when he fought Volkan Oezdemir. How great was that? But in terms of how they match up, I think the fight's going to be contested primarily on the feet. I don't think either guy will be too eager to shoot takedowns. But what's going to stand out, and you touched on it, the 7-inch reach advantage for Johnny Walker. I do think he's in better form right now. There's not a whole lot of shame in losing to Magomed Ankalaev, who I thought was going to be fighting for the 205 title, but not to be. I don't know what the reason is. Some politics at play, potentially.
Guy can't get out of his own way. He's like getting DQs and no contest every other fight, man.
Yeah. So, yeah. And probably not a guy that the UFC looks at as a needle mover by any means either. But yeah, I would lean Walker. But hey, if you're looking for a little bit of a lottery ticket on this fight, a minor one, Walker to win in the first round, plus 425. This is a guy with 18 first-round victories in his career. So he's not being paid by the hour, right? Sometimes you see him, and he has changed up his style a little bit for sure. But, yeah, we'll see. This is a guy with a very low fighter IQ, too. So not really a guy you can totally trust, right? But I'm not betting it, but I would lean Walker for sure.
Okay. Yeah, man, I'm not sure. I might get to the window here on this one. We'll see. It's close to a pick 'em. Walker's edged ever so slightly to like minus 120-ish in that ballpark. So, slight favorite, I guess. And you don't want to really lay chalk in this kind of a spot. But I'm going to go back to my crazy little area here, man. I might play Johnny Walker by sub. I hit that once against Ion Cutelaba, and that was mostly because Ion sticks his neck in guillotines. It was more Ion than it was Johnny. But in this one, I kind of think Johnny's going to grapple. And with what we saw with, Volkan's last couple of fights where he gets tired and he can be taken down, I think this is the spot where a guy like Walker can stay safe, stay on top of him, and just doesn't really even have to expose himself to any danger. An arm triangle, in round 3 or 4 where he can stay on top, control the position, and not fall off. I think that's totally live here in this spot. And those round 2, round 3 sub numbers are insane. So maybe a sprinkle there for me. We'll see if I get to a money line. But yeah, this one's risky, guys. Be careful. Don't put your bankroll on this one, because either one of these guys could go to sleep within 30 seconds. Tough fight. All right. Let's see here. I'm all mixed up here. Got to cue this one up. Here we go. Muhammad Naimov takes on Felipe Lima. Guys, this is a short notice fill-in fight. Joe, I'll be honest with you. I don't have a whole lot to say on this one. Naimov's opponent was off the card, and I wasn't sure they were going to get a late notice fill-in, so I didn't go back and run the tape on him. I know Naimov. I like him. He's 11-2. He's got serious power. Of the Tajikistan fighters in the UFC, he's probably the good one. He's got some serious power in his hands. I really like Naimov. He's tough. He's durable. He can grapple. He showed that he can like fight back from when he gets rocked and hurt. I like everything about him. His opponent, though, Felipe Lima, is somebody who's completely unknown to me. He's the Octagon champion, getting the call up here on 1 week. He's 12-1, and I'm going to have to run the tape. I know nothing about this kid. I will say, guys, anybody who's filling in here on short notice, even if we're hyped about this Lima kid, which I know a lot of people are really excited about this prospect, he has to travel to Saudi Arabia, like on 1 week's notice. Going to be a long flight. He's going to drag in there. The time difference, time change could be a serious problem. The cardio could be a serious problem. Like, you got to be careful. Even if this is a hot prospect the UFC should have signed, this is a tall order to come into this fight against a guy who's probably very comfortable, already well adjusted over there with a full camp. It's going to be a tall order to overcome that kind of a spot. No line out yet from what I saw. I'm probably going to pick Naimov blindly here just for the sake of the show for you guys, but I got to do my homework. Joe, do you have anything on this one?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't even look into that fight yet. So still early in the week. That's something I'll dig into, though, and potentially see if there's any spots that come up in the prop markets. But yeah, not a fight that I dug into. So I'm not going to come on and just say a bunch of bullshit. So
yeah. And that's, man, I try to educate as much as I possibly can. I gave you guys everything I got. That's it. I got to do the homework. So as always, maybe I'll have a little bit more for you on the Friday show. We can wrap up a little bit there and give you some more info. But for now, that's all I got for you. Next up, we got Kelvin Gastelum taking on Daniel Rodriguez. And the hits just keep coming, Joe. I think these guys are both shot to bits. I'll be honest with you. Like, this is a tough fight because both guys had so much potential. They've been around forever. They've been in wars, and they've looked bad recently. I would love to say either one of them is getting a step down in competition, but they both are, actually. Daniel Rodriguez is 37 years old. He's coming off getting whooped by Ian Gary. He got broke by Neil Magny. He's 0-2 in his last couple fights, and the win before that was back in 2022 where he got a greasy split against the Leech Jing Liang, which I actually think I scored for Lee that night. So his last legitimate win was Kevin Lee in 2021 when Kevin decided to try his hand up a weight class because he didn't want to cut to 155 anymore right before he retired for the first of 3 times. Like that, he just doesn't have a credible win in the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm not high on D-Rod. Frankly, I never really have been. And this is a spot where there's no way I'm looking at the D-Rod side based on what we've been seeing lately. Now, Kelvin Gastelum, I mean, he's 32, so technically speaking, he's still in his prime. He's training out of Fight Ready, my favorite gym. I love Fight Ready. It's right over here around the corner in Arizona. But he is having just as tough of a time. I mean, he's 2-5 since the Adesanya fight, man. How crazy is that? Like, in my brain, he still had a couple of decent wins after the Israel Adesanya fight. Nope. He lost to Darren Till by split decision. Yeah. Which, frankly, I think there was some shenanigans going on in that one. I felt like he really won that fight, and Darren Till is awful. He did beat Ian Heinisch, but lost to Robert Whittaker, lost to Jared Cannonier. No surprises there. The Chris Curtis fight, you guys know I'm a Chris Curtis fanboy, but that fight was swung by the illegal shot in round 2. Round 2 was the swing round. It was round 1 for Kelvin, round 3 for Chris, very blatantly, obviously. And I think the only thing that was different in round 2 was that Chris almost got knocked out by an illegal shot that didn't get called. So there's a minute and a half gap there where it looks like Kelvin's doing better work than he otherwise should have. Chris Curtis would have beat him. I run it back. Chris Curtis beats him. I promise you guys. Like, he's not doing well. And then getting mauled by Sean Brady. Can't hold that one too much against him. I think Kelvin's got a little more gas in the tank than D-Rod does at this point. I'm hoping Coach Santino can get a little bit out of him here at Fight Ready, have him on point, have him ready to go for this fight. He's in the right weight class finally. I don't know what he's got as far as power. I know he's got the hand speed. D-Rod's chin is a little questionable and suspect at this point. I have to pick Kelvin Gastelum, but minus 250 has just kind of a gross, queasy feeling in my stomach on this one, man. What about you?
Yeah, a lot of question marks in this fight. As a result, it's probably going to be a stay away for me. Most notably, those question marks. D-Rod, He's getting up there in age, 37 years old. He's been off for a year. He's coming off of 2 awful performances versus Ian Gary. He got subbed by Neil Magny as well. And then you look at Gastelum. A lot of losses, man. These losses are piling up for him. In his defense, a lot of those losses have been against pretty respectable competition here. I mean, Sean Brady's a guy who's on his way up. Cannonier, Robert Whittaker. Not a lot of people beat Robert Whittaker, by the way. Getting subbed by Jack Hermanson, that's not necessarily a good look. You touched on the Darren Till fight. And then probably the peak of his career was that Adesanya fight. They went right down to the wire. So we'll give him all the credit in the world for that fight. But the last time he finished somebody was when he finished Michael Bisping in 2017. Oof. So it's been a while, man. And Rodriguez, his last finish came in 2021. He might be completely shot. So my lean for the fight would be Gastelum by decision, -105. But as a result of like the question marks that we discussed in here, Gastelum's overvalued at -250, right? But that said, do you want to place a bet on D-Rod, who's been off for a year and he looked awful in his last 2 fights? So, fingers crossed, we'll hope for a good fight, but it could be a snoozer that goes to decision. And I would lean towards Gastelum picking up the W.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on the same page right there with you. Hey, Aussie fight fan, Kelvin Gastelum has 6 split decisions on his record.
Jesus, man.
Let's see what that split prop looks like, man. If they're giving you a half decent number when they give you the split decision prop, maybe that gets a little sprinkle this week. That's a good look.
I wonder if his career would have turned out differently if there was like a 175-pound weight class or 100, because he was always kind of in between. It's like, okay, you're too small for a 185, but you get killed at 170. And it was always kind of, okay, I lost at 185. I'm going to try to go down to 170 and see how that goes. And maybe, it didn't go very well. I'm going to go back at the 185, So he's been kind of yo-yoing between the 2 divisions. And it's probably too late for him at this point of his career.
Yeah. And, man, I said this, the last time I broke down a Kelvin Gastelum fight. I honestly think Israel Adesanya took a piece of him. I just think he's never been completely the same since that Izzy fight. And, I'm a couch jockey, right? I'm not a fighter. These guys go through so much stuff, and I just respect the hell out of them for getting in there. But something happened that night. You know what I mean? I wonder if his hand got raised, if we saw a different version of Kelvin Gastelum, if he wins that split over Izzy instead, what does his career look like? But instead, he lost a couple of fights, dropped his confidence, couldn't quite get right, and now we're dealing with this. It's game of inches, man. It's crazy what could have been.
Yeah, some people have had that same theory about Dan Hooker in his fight against Dustin Poirier there, and he looks like he might be on the way back a little bit, but he looked pretty bad in the next few fights after the Poirier banger. But yeah, I could see that theory being true, man.
It's crazy. But the one thing I'm mostly sad about with this fight is that we can't tell the jokes anymore, Joe, because Nasrat Haqparast and Kelvin Gastelum will be in the same room together finally. Everyone is always saying, I've never seen them in the same place.
Yeah.
It's happening on Saturday. So
I can't wait.
Man, good joke. Right down the drain. Thanks, UFC. Appreciate that one. Next up, man, co-main event. Sergei Pavlovich taking on Alexander Volkov. Russia on Russia violence here in your co-main event, guys. And I said, when we started talking about the gloves, the chatter started on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. I was like, Sergei will test the theory. Sergei Pavlovich will let us know if there's a problem with these gloves on Saturday, man. This guy is just life and death round 1. That's it. He is Derek Lewis, but like cranked up to the 9th degree. All he does is come forward, wing the biggest power punches you've ever seen. He's Ivan Drago if they did the Captain America super serum in him. Like, this dude is massive. I think he's got a bit of a cardio concern, I'll be honest with you. But because he's got strong hips and decent enough wrestling, nobody's dragging this guy out of the first round. So it just kind of doesn't matter. Like, I've tried to fade Sergei a couple different times because I was like, if this guy can just survive round 1, he'll get him. No, it never happens. It never happens. You either get him in round 1 to stop him, or you don't survive round 1. That's the only thing that's happening here. Now, Volkov's my guy. Volkov is actually the originator of the 7-unit max bet, because back in the day, my guy Drago was completely underrated by the betting market. There were times where we could lay like minus 150 on Drago in a spot where he should have been minus 300. They just didn't know back then, man. So I made bank on Alexander Volkov a couple different times, but this run that he's been on, I've had to kind of steer clear of, because that Tom Aspinall fight, the Cyril Gane fight, like they were kind of bad looks. The Marcin Tybura fight, even, like he still just kind of looked like a little bit of a shell of himself. He was a little slower. He was a little more tentative. He didn't really want to get in there. Looks good now. You know, the Romanov and Tuivasa fights, he looked like his old self in these spots. So maybe we're past that. But he's just not a first round banger type of guy, in my opinion. I hate to say it, man, but I think Pavlovich is going to clip Volkov. Volkov's so gangly. He's long. He's skinny. He's not like these other super heavyweights that are just solid bricks of muscle. And he does a lot with his hands low. Like when he gets into slugfests, a lot of his punches will come like this. You know what I mean? They'll come from the hip. They'll come from the side. His face is going to be wide open in this spot. If he can't get a takedown or get this fight to the ground early, I know he's going to try to use footwork. He's going to try to front kick. He's going to try and keep that space and that distance. I just don't think that's going to be enough to keep Sergei Pavlovich off of him. Unless he like front kick teep KOs him by like busting his body up or something like that. I don't see it. I think Sergei's going to crash the pocket and knock him out.
Yeah, Pavlovich, 16 first round victories in his career by KO/TKO. He's going to be my pick. So how do you want to bet him, essentially? The reason I like him is pretty obvious. You pointed out a lot of the reasons, but take a look at Volkov. Whenever he has a step up in competition, he pretty much loses. He is a high-level gatekeeper. He is a gatekeeper to the top 5 in the heavyweight division, essentially. Losses to Aspinall, Cyril Gane, Curtis Blades. Derek Lewis isn't in that class of fighter, but he lost him back in 2018. We will remember. So Pavlovich, this is a guy that lands an insane 8.21 significant strikes per minute. And that's across the sample size of around 9 fights in the UFC. Usually when you see a number that high, you'll look and say, well, how many fights does the guy have in the UFC? And it'll be 2 or 3 fights, sometimes 1. That's 8 fights in the UFC. 6 straight KO victories before losing to Aspinall, all in the first round. He's a younger man. He's absorbed a lot less damage. So you can take him to win by KO, minus 160, or you can take him to win by first round KO, around plus 130. I would wait to see. That's at Bet Online right now. I wait to see what the DraftKings and FanDuels are offering on that prop. But or you can take him in round 1 plus 125. I doubt he's going to submit him in the first round. You never know. Sometimes they surprise you. But yeah, I think Pavlovich is going to run right over him and get back on track here.
Hey, or you could buy into the gloves narrative and play him by decision at plus 525.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, there we go.
No, I'm kidding. I am kidding. I think that minus 160 might actually not be half bad, because it could be the first ever second round knockout in Sergei Pavlovich's career. Because if Volkov is maintaining the distance and trying to keep the space in the distance, that could extend this fight just a little bit longer than most people are expecting. I know that's gross to lay that kind of chalk on a finish prop like that, but in this case, I don't know that it's necessarily bad, man.
Yeah, I mean, Volkov, he can be pretty hit or miss, because sometimes he shows up and you're like, wow, what a great performance by him. But like we said, in that when he has that step up in competition, it tends not to go very well. That fight against Curtis Blades, do you remember that fight? Curtis Blades was absolutely gassed at the end of that. That wasn't something he was able to take advantage of. But who knows? Pavlovich is coming off a loss. Now, he bounced back pretty good in his previous loss in the UFC. That was versus Aliskerov. But the opponent he fought was a gentleman named Marcelo Golm. Not exactly a household name, but he took him out in minute 6 into the fight. So, yeah, sometimes fighters react differently, though, when they're coming off a loss, and it was a KO loss in the first round. So who knows? But I'm going to go with what the evidence, what the sample sizes are telling me, and that's Pavlovich by KO, most likely in the first round, I'm thinking.
Yeah. You know, actually, Corner Pressure has a great point here that I didn't think about. Volkov is on record saying that these guys are friends and they've like trained together before, and he didn't want this fight. He accepted another fight. Was it Gone? No, it wasn't Gone. Volkov legitimately like came out and did an interview and said that he accepted another fight, but they booked this one instead. The UFC is going full PFL here, where they're like forcing guys that like each other to fight each other in the cage, which, by the way, I think is a poor choice from a matchmaking perspective. Do you remember that PFL fight where it was like the two training partners? It was like two years ago now, and it was like the guys. He was like the godfather of his kids. Like they were that close. They were like best friends, and they made them fight in like an eliminator fight for the PFL playoffs.
Yeah.
And it was the most boring decision you've ever seen in your life because they refused to hurt each other, which understandably. I want to hear some interviews because if that's what's going on here in this spot, that decision prop might actually not be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's some emotion involved, which I didn't know about. So yeah, that is something you kind of doing a bit of a guessing game if you factor that into your head.
Definitely
handicapping too much, but that might be one of those things in hindsight. If it does go to decision and you go back and watch the fight and you're like, Jesus, Pavlovich really laid off in this situation. He probably could have, who knows? But who knows? Maybe in hindsight we'll look back and say that did play a factor in the fight.
It'll be interesting. That does temper me just a little bit, laying the minus 160 on the KO. I got to do a little bit more work on that one because that's an angle I wasn't really thinking about. So thank you so much for pointing that out. That's why the chat rocks in these type of situations. Thank you, Corner. Really appreciate that. All right, everybody. Main event time. We got 800 live viewers right here on the Home of Fight. Thank you for hanging out with us this evening. We're going to go ahead and talk about Rob the Reaper Whittaker. He's taking on short notice replacement Ikram Aliskerov, and I love this fight, man. We were supposed to get Khamzat Chimaev here in this spot. Unfortunately, he's taking another sabbatical from the UFC, it seems. No idea what's going on with that guy at this point. It's pretty tough because Dana's even coming out and kind of roasting him now. Did you see the quote today? Dana was like, I don't know what it is, man, but every time he gets close to fighting, he gets sick. And then he's like, we can't get him over here in the PI, so we can't have doctors looking at him. We don't know what's going on. And that's a tough quote from Dana.
There's always something. I don't think he's going to live up to his potential. This has been going on for a while. I mean, you give him a pass for the COVID stuff. You can give him a pass for all of it if you want. We truly don't know what his side of the story is. But, he set the UFC on fire. What did he fight 4 times in a year? And he beat the shit out of all these guys. And then since then, what is it? 4 fights in 4 years, something along those lines. So I think his career is being mismanaged. And I don't totally know why. Some people say that there's some visa issues and he can't come into the United States. There's been situations with him pulling out, getting injured, getting sick. It's crazy that they booked him versus Paulo Costa in a fight, the two guys who pull out the most. But
maybe a bad decision in hindsight.
I don't think he's going to live up to that potential, man, because even when he's fought non-cans, you'll call them, Gilbert Burns gave him a great go. And we saw him get tired later in the fight. Kamaru Usman off the couch on a week's notice going up to 185. He gave him a pretty good go there too. So he's a really good one-round fighter. Absolutely. But his career is being mismanaged. I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's to blame, if the UFC is to blame, something else is to blame. But it's very disappointing because this was a true fight versus a 185er. This is a guy, Chimaev, that the UFC has really wanted to push. But if you can't push a guy if he's never fighting, and it's hard to market a guy and build cards around the guy when he keeps on pulling out. Yep. You know what I mean? So it's very frustrating. I have nothing against him. I think he's a good fighter with all the potential in the world, but you got to show up to work, right?
Absolutely. It's tough, man. It's real tough. But the thing is, I've seen a lot of people, and actually whoever the damn admin who runs the Home of Fight Twitter, he said that they feel like Ikram is an even worse fight here for Rob than Khamzat.
Okay.
Man, I'm like, that's a sit, and that sure is a take. There's some people out there that are thinking that. I'm not sold on Ikram. I mean, he's 31 years old. I know he has a stellar record, 15-1. His one loss coming by KO, and it was to Khamzat. So, okay, you want to write off Khamzat taking this guy out in round 1. He's looked stellar ever since. But I'm like, you guys know Phil Hawes is a guy that I've done my very best to be on the other side of. He's chinny. He's bad. He's been busted for a long time. This guy knocks him out. He takes out Warley Alves, another guy who's on the retirement career path, another guy who sometimes just doesn't show up. Those 2 wins in round 1, frankly, mean nothing to me, Joe. Absolutely nothing. And you watch when he goes for broke in those fights, at the end of round 1, he is gassed. His mouth is hanging open. He's tired. Like, he's really working for it after 1 round of trying to get somebody out of there. Rob Whittaker is just a consummate professional. This guy still is fighting for that like number 2 spot in the world. Like, he's number 2, number 3. Like, he just has never fallen all the way off. It's incredible what Rob has been capable of in his entire career here. 25-7. He has been camping out over in Abu Dhabi for this fight. He flew out there like a couple weeks ago to get acclimated, to get ready, and he's been training over there. And then like the week of the fight, a couple days out, it's like an hour flight to get to Saudi Arabia from there. So he's there, he's acclimated, he's ready. And Ikram, once again, guys, is going to be the guy taking a 1-week notice fight. He was supposed to be in Vegas this last weekend.
That's significant.
As a massive favorite in that spot. And instead of giving him a gifted squash match, they're shipping him halfway across the country to get him out there quick. He's missing his peak. As an athlete, these fighters, they try to peak the night of the fight. That got fucked up because he didn't fight on Saturday. His cardio, what's it going to look like? He has to adjust to the schedule. So he's got a couple days off in the middle for travel. Is he going to be able to ramp himself back up? I think Ikram's going to have about 3 minutes to win this fight, Joe. I'll be honest with you. If he doesn't get the job done in the first 3 minutes, and he can, Rob has been cracked a couple times. He's been knocked out 3 times. Dreykus got him. Adesanya got him. Those were in round 2, by the way. If this guy can't keep the type of forward pressure it takes to destroy Rob, it's going to look like a -1,000 favorite in hindsight. Rob is so good at mixing the martial arts. He's got the calf kick. He's got the head kick. He's got such good timing and range control. You know exactly what he's going to do, and you still can't stop it because he's so good at timing that distance. A lot of real high-level fighters have had a real hard time with Rob. And like I said, I think if he drags this fight into the deep waters, I'm not sure Ikram can swim, man. I'm a little surprised at the love for Ikram, and I'm a little surprised that they're giving us this low of a price on Rob, considering all the X factors with the travel and all that kind of stuff. It's going to look dumb in hindsight if this guy knocks Rob out in round 1, which he absolutely can do. I'm telling you guys, that's his path to victory. Round 1 KO. It's on the table. But man, -148 on Rob Whittaker right now, I think that's the side.
Yeah, I'm on Robert Whittaker, seeing him as low as -136. If this is a trap, I'm willing to fall into it because I think Robert Whittaker, over the past half decade, he's been one of the best fighters in the UFC without a belt around his waist. And no exaggeration, I think this is one of the biggest steps up in competition in the history of the UFC. That's not an exaggeration, guys. So Ikram has 3 fights under the UFC banner, 2 in the UFC, 1 Dana White Contender Series. None of his opponents have a winning record in the UFC. And then you factor in the fight situation for these guys. It is not ideal. You're supposed to be fighting in Las Vegas at a completely different time of the day. Now you're flying to a completely different part of the world, fighting at a completely different time of the day. So he's going to be mixed up a little bit. Whittaker is one of the best. Some people who are going to pick against him are probably going to point out that he got rocked by Costa there. I think that was in round 1 of that fight, and with the head kick there, and then he ended up cruising to victory. Whittaker has been a bit of a decision machine. 8 of his last 10 fights have gone to the scorecards. A lot of those 5-rounders as well. Whittaker by decision +265. I don't think Ikram can hang out for 5 rounds, but I'm just satisfied taking Robert Whittaker. -136. I don't think he's really shown. He's going to slow down at some point here. As we know, Father Time is undefeated. Yep. But he hasn't shown really any signs of slowing down. He's only lost to Adesanya and Dreykus du Plessis here recently, the former champion and the current champion, the 2 guys that are fighting at, UFC 305 or 306. I always get 305. 306 is a spear, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah. Whittaker, sometimes we see this, man, with these prospects get overvalued. Like we have examples of that in hindsight, that Benoit Saint Denis, Dustin Poirier line was ridiculous, right? Like,
my guy Benoit Saint Denis.
How
much did the staff play into that, though?
Well, so that's true. That's true. And everyone that I've respected out of like the online MMA betting community, they were all on Saint Denis. I think Rafael Fiziev, wasn't he favored over Justin Gaethje? Like you see situations, or it was close, and you see these situations where you have the guy on the come up, and it's a classic matchmaking situation where you take the veteran who's been a staple of the division, you know, in a lot of big fights, and you pair him. Maybe they're slightly on their way down, taking on the guy who's on the ascension on the way up. And classic matchmaking situation. And a lot of these times we see the prospect, if you will, being overvalued. And I think that's the case here. I do not get it why you can get Robert Whittaker as low as minus 136. If it's a trap, like I said, I'm willing to fall into it. I will not feel bad. I like him minus 136. There is something dangerous, though, to play devil's advocate about a fighter with nothing to lose. You know, we have seen situations before, very high-level fights. Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor, Michael Bisping versus Luke Rockhold 2. Those guys were both big underdogs, short notice opponents, fighters with nothing to lose. Maybe that could be the case, but I'm not betting on that. Robert Whittaker all day.
If I could just devil's advocate, your devil's advocate, here's the thing about the fighter with nothing to lose, though. The guy fights the same way regardless. Like a fighter with nothing to lose is like a technical decision machine who knows he's got 7 minutes of cardio, so goes for it instead. This guy goes for it every single fight. That's how he fights. So like, I almost kind of think it's the same situation. It's not like he's holding anything back ever anyway. So man, I'm glad you agree with me. I love it. I love that we're lining up here on this one. I am more than willing to step into the bear trap with you. I like Rob Whittaker. And you know what? And to your Benoit Saint Denis point, if I can circle back to that, I think Benoit Saint Denis probably could have won that fight, and the staph infection and the cardio probably was a big, big factor. But he still shouldn't have been minus 220. And that's where the line matters. The disrespect on Dustin Poirier, a veteran in that spot, that's what it all came down to. So I think this is about right. You know, Rob deserves to be the favorite. We'll play it. We'll see if we get bit by it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I love these fight cards. It's going to be late afternoon, my time here, and the East Coast of Canada, early afternoon, around noon for you in Arizona. I love these cards at funny times, man. Like I remember when it was Max Holloway versus Korean Zombie. It was on like Saturday morning, my time. It was absolutely fantastic. I love when they mix it like this. I'm kind of bummed about the the UFC 304 in London, and the London fans are going to be there like 5 a.m. local time.
Dude, that is so brutal. Like they have to be awake our time all year round, all the time. They've got an event coming in their own backyard, and the UFC is still making them stay up until like 2 a.m. I feel so bad for the London fans, man. That's so messed up. UFC, come on, make us stay up for once, just one time.
Yeah, that's going to be, I wonder how liquor sales and stuff are going to work. Like if they're going to cut liquor off at a certain time, because they're going to be drinking all day. They're going to show up at like midnight their time, and you know these cards go on for a long time, 7, 8, 9 hours sometimes.
Calling for another beer at 3 a.m.
Yeah, man. So yeah, that's a bit unfortunate, but I don't know. The UFC does things for a reason, and I guess they're going to make more money this way. So whatever, right?
Yep. Got smarter people than me make those decisions. But guys, there you go. That is UFC Saudi Arabia. I have one bet so far, and it's a max. My other bet fell off. I will be adding Robert Whittaker to my card. That's happening. And the problem is, you know, man, I've been doing my Link Memorial Dog of the Week ever since my dog passed away. Zelda shouted out Weston Wilson last week, and I completely ignored her. That's my other dog. Completely disrespected her. She called it. We could have got on Weston Wilson thanks to her. but I don't have a dog this week at this point. I'm going to have to do a little work, you guys. There's a couple dogs that I think might be live, but this is a really tough card. So I'll get back to you guys on that one. Keep an eye out for social medias. And of course, we'll do the Friday show where I can wrap up and let you know what's going on. Joe, thank you so much for the time, man. This was an absolute blast. I've been listening to you for a long time. So really cool and fun to do a show with you. If you want to let the people know where they can find your content, shout any sponsors out, whatever you want to do, the floor is yours, man. Feel free to let them know whatever you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. JTFOZ on Twitter and Instagram. I publish all my work there. I cover the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and the UFC. I do a show 3 times a week called Before You Bet on the Covers YouTube channel. So if you like, it's basically, our picks for that night's game. I had 4 picks for Major League Baseball tonight. Off to a pretty good start, by the way. 2 picks for the NBA Finals game. I'm on the under. Off to a pretty good start on that one. So yeah, a little bit of everything. NFL is a big one. And of course the UFC, man, these fight nights, baby. I don't bet the volume that Clint, the animal savage, does. I told him before I come on, I said, I have a handful of picks, but I see the cards he puts out, 10, 12 picks in some cases. So yeah, a little bit of everything, man. I try to have fun with it. There's some people in the betting space who take things way too seriously. I'm not one of those guys, man. I like to have fun with it. At the end of the day, it's entertainment. And some people forget that, people you see all the stuff going on with Caitlin Clark and stuff like that. It's awful. But yeah, I like to have fun with it, cover a little bit of everything. So check me out, JTFOZ and covers.com.
Love to see it. Thank you so much, Joe. Everybody, thank you for hanging out with us for the show. We'll see you Thursday for the Total Takedown, Friday for the Undefeated Post Weigh-In Show. We'll break out the tinfoil cap a little more often on that one for you. And otherwise, hey, good luck on your bets. Good luck on all that degenerate action. Joe, I'm with you on the under, so let's get, no points and fingers crossed for my Mavs futures. Squeeze out a Mavs win.
Let's go, baby.
That'll do it for me. Good luck, everybody. Let's roll.
Thank you, guys.